Anna had always been an adventurous spirit, with a love for travel and exploration. So when she found herself with a week of unexpected free time, she decided to take a solo trip to a small town she had never been to before. She packed her bag, filled up her gas tank, and set off on the open road. After driving for several hours, she arrived in the small town just as the sun was beginning to set. She drove down the main street, taking in the charming shops and restaurants, and eventually found herself in front of an old, abandoned theater. Despite the no trespassing signs and the chain link fence surrounding the building, Anna couldn't resist the allure of the old theater. She had always been fascinated by history and the stories of the past, and the idea of exploring the abandoned theater was too intriguing to resist. She parked her car and climbed the fence, making her way towards the theater's entrance. The doors were locked, but she was able to find a window that had been left slightly ajar. She squeezed through the window and found herself inside the dark and musty theater. As she shone her flashlight on the lobby, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The air was thick with dust, and she could hear the sound of dripping water echoing through the darkness. She made her way deeper into the theater, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As she explored the different rooms and stages, Anna began to notice strange things happening. Lights would flicker on and off, and she could hear whispers and murmurs coming from the darkness. She told herself it was just her imagination, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Suddenly, she heard a loud crash coming from the stage. She rushed towards it, her heart racing. When she arrived, she found that a large piece of the ceiling had collapsed, revealing a hidden room. Curiosity getting the better of her, Anna climbed up to the room and stepped inside. What she found there would change her life forever. The room was filled with old film reels and equipment, long forgotten and left to rot. But as Anna explored further, she found something truly terrifying. The reels contained footage of people, but not just any people. They were her classmates, her friends, and even her family. As she watched the reels, she realized that they were not just any ordinary films. They were snuff films, depicting the brutal and horrific murders of the people she knew. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, and she felt a wave of nausea and fear wash over her. Suddenly, the room went dark, and she heard a loud laugh echoing through the darkness. She spun around, her flashlight illuminating a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was the projectionist, a man who had worked at the theater before it closed. The man explained that he had been making the films for years, using the theater as a cover for his twisted hobby. Anna was horrified, and she couldn't believe what she was hearing. As she made a run for the door, the projectionist lunged at her, knocking the flashlight from her hand. Anna stumbled through the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the man's heavy breathing and footsteps behind her, and she knew she had to find a way out. She stumbled through the darkness, her hands groping the walls for guidance. She could hear the man getting closer and closer, and she knew she was running out of time. Finally, she found the door and burst through it, collapsing on the floor outside. She looked back, but the man was gone. She had escaped. Anna never went near the theater again, and she never spoke of what she had seen that night. The town continued to whisper about the haunted theater, and Anna carried the weight of the secret with her for the rest of her life. The abandoned theater stood as a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, and the horrors that can be found in the most unexpected places. Anna's trip was meant to be a journey of discovery and adventure, but instead, it turned into a nightmare that she would never forget. Jack and his girlfriend were on a road trip, driving through the countryside when they stumbled upon an old, decrepit building that looked like it had once been a playhouse. The building was surrounded by overgrown weeds and trees, and its once grand facade was now covered in dirt and grime. Despite its ominous appearance, Jack was intrigued and convinced his girlfriend to explore the building with him. As they approached the playhouse, they noticed a strange chill in the air. The entrance was unlocked, and they cautiously stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The stage was still intact, but the seats were broken and rotting. As they explored the building, they found old props and costumes, remnants of a bygone era. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. They cautiously made their way up the creaky stairs and found themselves in the dressing rooms. Jack's girlfriend wanted to leave, but Jack was determined to find the source of the noise. As they walked down the hallway, they heard whispers and footsteps. The temperature dropped, and the air grew heavy. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and they were trapped. Jack's girlfriend started to panic, but Jack tried to calm her down. They heard a loud scream, and then silence. Jack's girlfriend begged to leave, but Jack insisted on finding out what was going on. He opened the door, and they were met with darkness. As they made their way down the hallway, they saw shadows moving in the distance. Jack's girlfriend was terrified and begged Jack to leave, but he was too curious. They turned a corner and saw a group of ghostly apparitions, the spirits of the performers who had died in the fire. The spirits accused Jack and his girlfriend of disturbing their resting place. Jack's girlfriend was hysterical, but Jack tried to reason with the spirits. They demanded that Jack and his girlfriend leave immediately, but Jack refused. The spirits became angrier, and the temperature dropped even further. Suddenly, the spirits vanished, and Jack and his girlfriend were alone again. They quickly made their way out of the building, shaken but unharmed. As they drove away, they looked back at the playhouse, which stood ominously in the distance. Days later, Jack and his girlfriend couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They tried to forget about the playhouse, but it was always in the back of their minds. They eventually learned that the playhouse had a dark history, and the spirits of the performers were still roaming the halls. Years went by, and Jack and his girlfriend moved on with their lives. But every now and then, they would drive by the old playhouse, and it would bring back memories of that fateful day. The playhouse still stood, a haunting reminder of the horror they had experienced. Once upon a time, in a small town, there was an abandoned theater that had been closed for decades. The theater, once a bustling hub of activity and entertainment, had been left to decay and deteriorate. The town's residents did their best to avoid the place, as rumors of strange noises and eerie occurrences had earned the theater a reputation for being haunted. Despite the warnings of his friends and the warnings of the town, high school student Tom found himself drawn to the old theater. He had always been fascinated by history and the stories of the past, and the idea of exploring the abandoned theater was too intriguing to resist. One dark and stormy night, Tom snuck out of his house with a flashlight and a backpack filled with supplies. He made his way to the theater, his heart racing with excitement and fear. As he approached the building, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the rusted metal sign creaked ominously. Undeterred, Tom pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The air was musty and stale, and he could hear the sound of dripping water echoing through the darkness. He shone his flashlight around the lobby, taking in the crumbling plaster walls and the dusty, abandoned ticket booth. He made his way deeper into the theater, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. He could feel the weight of the past pressing down on him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As he explored the different rooms and stages, Tom began to notice strange things happening. Lights would flicker on and off, and he could hear whispers and murmurs coming from the darkness. He told himself it was just his imagination, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Suddenly, he heard a loud crash coming from the stage. He rushed towards it, his heart racing. When he arrived, he found that a large piece of the ceiling had collapsed, revealing a hidden room. Curiosity getting the better of him, Tom climbed up to the room and stepped inside. What he found there would change his life forever. The room was filled with old film reels and equipment, long forgotten and left to rot. But as Tom explored further, he found something truly terrifying. The reels contained footage of people, but not just any people. They were his classmates, his friends, and even his family. As he watched the reels, he realized that they were not just any ordinary films. They were snuff films, depicting the brutal and horrific murders of the people he knew. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, and he felt a wave of nausea and fear wash over him. Suddenly, the room went dark, and he heard a loud laugh echoing through the darkness. He spun around, his flashlight illuminating a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was the projectionist, a man who had worked at the theater before it closed. The man explained that he had been making the films for years, using the theater as a cover for his twisted hobby. Tom was horrified, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. As he made a run for the door, the projectionist lunged at him, knocking the flashlight from his hand. Tom stumbled through the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the man's heavy breathing and footsteps behind him, and he knew he had to find a way out. He stumbled through the darkness, his hands groping the walls for guidance. He could hear the man getting closer and closer, and he knew he was running out of time. Finally, he found the door and burst through it, collapsing on the floor outside. He looked back, but the man was gone. He had escaped. Tom never went near the theater again, and he never spoke of what he had seen that night. The town continued to whisper about the haunted theater, and Tom carried the weight of the secret with him for the rest of his life. The abandoned theater stood as a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, and the horrors that can be found in the most unexpected places.